Okay, this is a quick overview of my live Eurorack system, which I use for playing improvised electronic music. And I'm going to just roughly go through everything that I'm using, a bit of an overview. There's loads of things I could go into lots of deep detail with, but the point of this video is to just kind of show that overview of how I've organised things, how things work. So there's basically two main components to the system. There's the Eurorack case, which has got all of the sound generation, the synth, the sampler, the effects, the mixing. All of the sound is made and manipulated in these various different modules. And then we've got the sequencer here, which is like the sort of brain of the system. This is a Torso T1 sequencer. Pretty unusual sequencer. You can use it to write parts and have pre-made sequences in it, but it's also really improvisational. You can manipulate the sequences with all of these knobs here. I won't go into huge depth on this because you could do tons of videos on this, and there are tons of videos on YouTube, but I'll just talk about how I actually use it and how I do things. So this is generating the rhythms, the notes, and the sort of musical instructions, and then all this lot is making the sound. So in terms of the case here, the Eurorack case, just roughly, the bottom row is largely things that generate sound. So we've got a sampler over here, we've got a sort of FM percussion module here, which is a synth really, based on a chip from an old games console, I think. It's called an FMP. Made by Timo Rosendahl, who's a great guy who even changed some of the firmware in this to make it work in the way that I wanted, so thanks for that. We've got a few synths over this side then, which is doing the more like melodic elements, and underneath there's some utility stuff, including a thing called a mutant brain, which is a MIDI to CV interface. So that takes the MIDI from this sequencer, which comes out and it turns it into CV and gate voltages for the gear that uses that system. The sampler actually uses MIDI directly, so it just comes in on this cable from MIDI, and the polycinematic can do CV and gate, but I'm running it using MIDI, largely because it can play chords and stuff. It's easier to manage it through MIDI. And then the top row along here, you've got sound generation mostly on the bottom. The top row is kind of modulation, effects, and then the mixing, the stuff that brings it all together. So sounds come out of the bottom here, go up to here, instructed by this. So just to go through quickly the things that I've got set up. The sampler here, the Bitbox Micro, is doing drums. It's also doing various kind of loops and samples, vocal samples, that kind of thing. We've got percussion from the FMP. I've got the Doepfer synth here, which I largely use for bass, although I'm experimenting with using it for a few different things now and then. I've got a synth voice, which is made from the Mutable Instruments Plaits. It's got a filter here on it and an envelope. Then I've got a Iteritas synth voice and the polycinematic synth voice, which can do polyphony, it can do chords and stuff like that. So that's a useful one to have. I used to use an external synth for doing the polyphonic stuff, but I managed to bring it all into the case. I really wanted to have everything in one thing, really. Yeah, so those various instruments make sound, and then they come up into the mixer, which brings it all together. There's some output stuff. I've got an outboard compressor, I've got an EQ, and this output module to send things out of the line out. And then the mixer can send things to effects. I've got two effects sends, one which is going to a reverb, which is over here, the FX Aid. That can do loads of stuff, but I'm mainly just using it for reverb at the moment. I'm sure I'll branch out at some point, but so many possibilities, I've got to just focus on some. And the second effect send B, goes out to this Mimeophon delay and a Mutable Instruments Clouds clone called a Monsoon. And then the other two modules up here, well, there's three other modules. One is the Mutable Instruments Stages, which is doing various sort of modulation things. A Tides, which is also a modulation, LFOs basically, coming from that. And I've got a 6-input VCA here, which is for controlling the sounds of some of the synths, but also for doing sidechains on them. Right, so I'll have a look through, show you how I actually make music with this. So the torso sequencer has 16 tracks. Each of these buttons represents like a track, and I can mute and unmute them using this button. So the way I've got it set up is all the drums, which are all coming from the sampler, are along the bottom row, and then the more melodic and bass and musical elements, or the percussion as well actually, all the synths basically are along the top. So I can have a bunch of sequences in here and I can bring them in, mute and unmute them. So if I start it playing here, I've got a kick drum over here. And I've got various other drums here. I can bring in a closed hi-hat, open hi-hat, clap over here, snare. I've got some sort of other percussion, a bit of a sort of closed hi-hat sound on that one, but different drum kits, I've got different percussion really. I've got a shaker and a ride. So you can control quite a lot of energy with this just by bringing things in and out. You know, you can just break it right down. Bring in a ride for some more energy. Bring in a shaker. And I've got all the sequences here, so you know I can bring in some different things. Can really improvise that if I want to. Go back to here. Yeah, there we go. So we've got all of the drums coming in here, and they come out of here into the mixer. This has only got 6 channels, which is not very much, and I've got 7 things going into it. So I've actually used the stereo link on this to just bring the drums in, not on a channel, but just as like an additional thing, which means I don't have much control of them on the mixer, but that's just one of those drawbacks with running things in such a small case, just how it goes. So yeah, we've got the drums going on here, and then we can have a look at, let's just bring it back down to just the kick, and we can bring in some other sounds. So we could unmute the bass over here, which is on the Doepfer synth. So, you know, nice analog synth voice there. I can play around with the voicing of that. It's nice to have a sort of really heavy analog voice for the bass there. So I've got that all the way over here. Intuitively, I would have put a kick drum and bass over on this side, but I often find I want to sort of pull them in and out quickly, and it's useful to have the mute button reachable with one hand to bring those in and out, so hence why I put it there. And then the other drums sort of you can just build up from here. The other thing I've got I can reach with one hand here is a sidechain. If I play the bass without the sidechain and then with it, so that's actually running from the sampler. There's just a bit of CV in the sampler that comes out, is inverted, and then run into the VCA to bring the bass in and out. That's pretty useful. I've got that routed to quite a few things, and I've got a switch here which I can bring it in and out for. It's sort of, I'm using quite a lot of modules in order to achieve this. I've got like a switch, I've got some multing going on, I've got this attenuverter here. I'm using both parts of that to get the sidechain and the VCA. It seems like quite a lot, but I think it's really worth it because it makes quite a big difference to the groove when you can bring a sidechain in and out on various different things. I'll show you what I mean with the percussion module. So if I just unmute this percussion track here and turn it up a bit, you can hear this sort of rather mad percussion going on from this FMP. I've got a bunch of percussion in the sampler, but it's just really nice to have something I can manipulate. Just come up with some really mad stuff on the fly. It's responding to the velocity. So if I just set that back to 0, it'd help if I selected the right track and did that. There you go. So that's, as you can see, it's just actually playing 16ths at the moment. But if I bring in some velocity groove, it does all sorts of things. I can change how much it affects it on here. So that's a lot of fun, and it works well with some reverb from the FX aid there. It works really well with some delay actually often. But it's pretty chaotic, so I really like to bring the sidechain in on that. Just turn the delay off for a sec, because it's happening from the VCA before it comes into the mixer, and then you can add the delay onto it. So it's really nice to be able to do that. If I just play it on its own, I mean, it's still pretty nice, but it just adds a great groove to it with that sidechain. And, you know, it makes it quite easy to do some really mad stuff and still keep it making musical sense, I guess. So that's my percussion. I think I was messing with the accent when I was doing that wrong on the snare, so the clap. Okay, let's just bring that down in the mix a little bit. We'll come along to first synth voice. So we've got the Plaits here on channel 3. Let's bring that in on the sequencer. So if I open up the filter on that, what's that doing? That's running an FM voice at the moment, right? So I can manipulate that on the Plaits itself. Filter. So yeah, loads you can do with that. Nice to have all these knobs for the envelope on this. I can really sort of change how that sounds, and I can bring in make it a bit more epic. Do a lot with those effects. So there we go, that's voice number 3. And then voice number 4, we've got this Iteritas, which does everything from sort of fairly polite sort of sawtooths to some really dirty stuff. So yeah, that's got quite a bit of range. It sort of always sounds like itself in some way. It's got its own character, but it can go from really clean to really dirty. I've mostly heard demos of people making it really dirty, but I quite like the clean sawtooth sound on it. So with that one, I'll just show you what I can do with the, let's just break this down a bit to just that, with the clouds. So I can bring in the delay here, the Mimeophon, which is just a really useful going from sort of spatial effects to mad effects. I'm just going to sort of turn that off at the moment. It's not actually possible to turn it off entirely, I don't think, with how I've got it set up, but it goes pretty low. And then what I can do is if I turn this up, it's also going off that effects bus to the Monsoon. So let's just get that set, and if I turn up the density on that, turn these down, modulations. You can probably hear it a bit better if I just pitch it up, and perhaps if I turn it up as well, maybe on the mixer. So this can do some really cool effects, especially with this LFO feeding into it. So I can modulate the position of it, I can modulate the size, change the texture, put some feedback, which gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. It's got its own little reverb built in, which is useful because I have no way of sending it to the reverb on this because it's just coming back into an effects send. You can make it more stereo, reverse. And one thing this is really useful for is if I just hit the freeze on it and just bring that right down on the Manus Iteritas, you can get some really nice sort of atmospheric loops going on. If I speed up the LFOs, you can manipulate that, bring the pitch down, bring it all right. Can sound quite cool, especially if I turn on the sidechain. Get some good stuff going on there. Not 100% in time, but you know, that adds some kind of feel to it. Maybe it'd sound better if I turned off the reverse. Doesn't make it sound much more in time, but still sounds pretty good, so I can just turn that down. It is a bit limited, only being able to use that or the delay, but that's a Mimeophon there. But it's just something that you work with, basically. And then the last synth that I've got here is the Polycinematic, which can play some chords. Cheesy kind of chord sequence there, but really good to be able to do some chords in this. It's just most of these synths are monophonic. It's just you know, you can do everything from just a sort of backing chord like that to something that's a bit more melodic and ranges around. And of course, sidechain that as well, which can be quite useful for those long chords. So that's the majority of stuff. Then I've got some like loops and things in the sampler. Stages is just giving me some controls of that. So I've got a filter there, I can bring in a drum loop. I could bring in some sort of texture. Sound effects. Got some percussion I can just trigger on there.
So yeah, it's all set up to make things sound good, but they don't always. So there's a lot of learning what kind of stuff sounds best and figuring out how to keep it improvised and stuff, basically. Bring things around at different times, keep things contrasting. Only got 4 synths, so you have to try and make the most of them. Something people often ask me about is how do you have different sounds and stuff for different sort of tracks? Well, I tend to play things as long evolving pieces, kind of like a DJ set, so everything mixed one into the other. I mean, for starters, I have a bunch of different sampler setups, so I can bring in different drum kits and stuff. If I bring in something really contrasting, there you go, you can hear that's got some different loops and different rolls and stuff. So I can keep some variation in the drums, that's quite helpful to do. I can switch between that, but that's the only real presets that I've actually got. And people sometimes sort of well, how do you switch to a different preset for a different track so it sounds different? I mean, one of the things I'd say is that I don't even try to. None of these things have presets. I guess this one's got its different models that you can switch between. But I just try and lean into the limitations really, and lean into evolving the sound slowly. So sometimes I might bring something out, let's say like this one, and then maybe while it's not playing, I might then sort of change it quite a bit so that when it comes back in again, I'd probably make it play something different as well. So let's just mess with that so that it plays something a bit different. And then when I bring it back in, there you go, it's effectively something different. But I find just leaning into the fact that things evolve, over time. Keep changing them slowly. Don't try and aim for any particular sound that's sort of pre-planned, because it's almost impossible to get that. So just evolve it slowly over time is what I do, and lean into the improvisation. Done the same thing with this sequencer. When I was first working with it, I was really focused on having a whole bunch of patterns pre-selected in here. The trouble with that is when you switch from one pattern to another, you can really lose where you are. You've no idea what's going on all these different tracks. So what I've been doing more recently is just leaning into actually improvising with it, just not having pre-prepared patterns too much, and just getting familiar with it enough and practiced enough to just be able to bring things in and out and manipulate them and change them. And I find that then I know where they are. I know what's going on with this track if I want to change it, because I put it there as part of the performance. So that's the approach, roughly. Do let me know if you want me to go into more detail on any particular things. I'm sure I will do some more videos going into some more detail on how I'm using particular bits of kit. There's so much I could say about the sequencer in particular, but there's lots I could say about lots of things. So hope that's been helpful. I hope it's been useful to see how I approach things. Only one person's way of doing it, which is the beauty of these kind of systems. No one's got the same collection of stuff, and it's very much been set up in the way that my brain works. But hopefully there's something that you can take from it and use for your own setups.